As we get to the end of the century, really the 1490s, Florence is going to undergo a political, cultural, and religious upheaval. And these things happen from time to time. We see it in our own day, where we have upheavals of one form or another in one country, region, or globally. But in this case, it all starts with a Dominican monk by the name of Savonarola. You see, this is going to be a movement against the earthly extravagances of 15th century Florence and the decadence of the Medici. What was decadent? Perfume, art, books, sculpture, all but the bare requirements for clothing. Even grooming was considered rather vain. So almost everything is suddenly inappropriate. And this is not uncommon. We see these cycles in human history. Now, let's get to Savonarola. He begins preaching at San Marco. As I said, he was a Dominican monk. Eventually, he will start preaching at the cathedral. Again, you go to San Marco, you get a small audience. As you move to the cathedral, you're going to get a larger audience, more people to follow you. What's he preaching? He is convinced that the end of the world was upon them, and God would strike down Florence for its paganism and concerns for the secular. He believed that an outbreak of syphilis that had been passing through the city was God's punishment to Florence. Amongst other things, everything can really be God's punishment if you put it in the right context. So he's basically saying, look, there's too much paganism, there's too much concern for the secular, we need to return to religion. He sees them turning away. And I should point out that to the common man, religion is still a key element of life. Most of the common working people in Renaissance Florence, they don't have this great decadent life. And so the idea that you return to a base that they're very familiar with, well, that's going to be enticing. And they're going to start following him. So he really attracts the poor and the working class and really gets them to start fighting against the middle and upper classes, creating class warfare and using it to his advantage. Now, when Lorenzo de' Medici dies in 1492, Savonarola prophesizes the end of Florence and Italy, and he will assume power. There's a little bit more to that. When Lorenzo de' Medici dies, he calls for Savonarola to give him his last rites. Savonarola basically says, no, I'm not interested in giving you reconciliation. Go ahead and burn in hell. Lorenzo's not terribly pleased with this. At the same time, the large golden globe at the top of the cathedral will be struck by lightning and fall to the street. So these things working together, of course, Savonarola can say, see, I'm right, God is on my side. And what more powerful ally can you have? So I said he has followers, and of course you can't imagine all poor and working class Florentines are his followers. His primary followers, the gangs that are going to run around and gather things from the rich, are primarily teenagers. Why? Because it's really easy to manipulate teenagers. They haven't formed their own identity, so you can hand them one, at least as long as you're not their parent. And Savonarola encourages that all scientific textbooks, classical literature, and philosophy be publicly burned. Basically, if it's not the Bible, he's not interested in keeping it. Many artists, including Botticelli, will take part, perhaps to protect himself. Now, Botticelli is a sad element that comes out of this, because after the bonfire of the vanities, we're going to see that he really never picks up a brush again. He doesn't do much after Savonarola. Now, the Medici will actually flee the city in 1494. Michelangelo and others will follow suit. Many artists will do so because they're an obvious target in this environment. Although there is some debate to his impact, Savonarola certainly was a setback to the Renaissance in Florence, dampening the Neoplatonic growth the city had enjoyed. He banished many of these wealthy patron families from Florence, causing artists to look elsewhere for work. And of course, that causes huge issues. You don't want your artists looking for work in Rome if you happen to live in Florence. Now, after 6 years of this religious oppression, which included the introduction of a kind of inquisition into the city, causing a fear of one's neighbors, Florence finally takes things into their own hands. Now, imagine that I'm trying to depose a monk ruler who has been creating class warfare and strife throughout the city. Well, I don't have to. I know what they did. They take him. They hang him outside Palazzo Vecchio in one of the major squares of the city, which you see here, and then burn him at the same time. It's one thing to be hung by the neck. It's another to be hated so much that we're going to hang you and then we're going to burn you just to make sure. Just to make sure that no one can even pick up any of your remains. You can't become a martyr. You can't come back and haunt us because there's nothing left. And in Christianity at the time, this was the ultimate betrayal, really, the ultimate FU, because if there's no body, then nothing can rise up again when Jesus comes at the second coming. There's nothing to be judged. It's as if you eliminated Savonarola from the afterlife itself.